Reconstruction of the American Civil War. Most people think that the Civil War was fought mainly over slavery. That is not accurate, though. The main reason the Civil War was fought was because of the politics. The North was an industrial center and they possessed no need for the slaves, where the South was an agriculture center. In the beginning, the government wanted there to be an equal amount of slave states and free states, hence the Missouri Act. Eventually, that became too difficult to maintain, and the new states coming into the Union were allowed popular sovereignty. The people voted between being a slave state or a free state. The majority of the votes will decide the type of state. When the national government decided to press the issue of owning slaves, the South was furious. This nation was founded on the Articles of the Confederation, and they gave the states more free will and power. So when the South wanted nothing to do with the national government stepping on their toes, which meant the Constitution gave the states less power, they wanted to legally secede from the Union. The national government said that the states could not secede from the Union, and that is why the American Civil War was fought. The Missouri Act started in 1820, and it is a part of U.S. history. It measured to work out between the North and the South, and passed by the U.S. Congress that allowed for admission of Missouri as the 24th state in 1821. It marked the beginning of the prolonged sectional conflict over the extension of slavery that led to the American Civil War. The territory of Missouri first applied for statehood in 1817, and by the early 1819, Congress was considering enabling legislation that would authorize Missouri to frame a state constitution. When Representative James Talmadge of New York attempted to add an anti-slavery amendment to the legislation, they ensured an ugly and rigorous debate over slavery and government's right to restrict slavery. The Talmadge Amendment prohibited the further introduction of slaves in Missouri and provided for emancipation of those already there when they reached age 25. The amendment passed the House of Representatives, controlled by the more populous North, but failed in the Senate, which was equally divided between free and slave states. Congress adjourned without resolving the Missouri question. The Civil War lasted from 1861 until 1865. The Southern states wanted to have their own nation and be able to decide what laws to have. The North did not want the country to be broken apart. In the election of 1860, Abraham Lincoln stated that he wanted to stop the spread of slavery. The Southern states said if Lincoln won, they would secede or leave from the Union. The Southern states seceded from the Union after Lincoln was elected. They had formed their own nation, the Confederate States of America. The war began in April of 1861 when the Confederate Army took over Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina. President Lincoln was forced to declare war. The war was long and bloody. Over 600,000 men on both sides died. Over 1,100,000 were injured. The South was devastated. General Lee surrendered to General Grant on April 9, 1865 at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. The war was over. The Union won. From my standpoint, the American Civil War Reconstruction did not reconstruct the South. It may have freed slaves, but for a very long time, African Americans couldn't vote and do various other things. For example, freedmen were African American people that worked on farms for white men. They got little or no profit from working, so the African American dream to have their own farm wouldn't be possible with the profits that they got from farming for the white men. Also, the 15th Amendment says that African Americans could vote. But the outcome of the amendment started the Ku Klux Klan and the White League. They both tortured or killed African Americans who didn't heed their warning about voting for African American congressmen. That is some of the reasons the Reconstruction did not reconstruct the South. The Reconstruction Amendments are the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the United States. They were adopted between 1865 and 1870, the 5 years immediately following the Civil War. The 13th Amendment to the Constitution declared that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, and shall exist within the United States, nor any place subject to their jurisdiction, formally abolishing slavery in the United States. The 13th Amendment was passed by Congress on January 31, 1865, and ratified by the states on December 6, 1865. 4 principles were asserted in the text of the 14th Amendment. They were that the state and the federal citizenship for all people regardless of race, both born and naturalized in the United States, was reaffirmed. No state would be allowed to abridge the privileges and immunities of the citizens. No person was allowed to be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. No person could be denied equal protection of the laws. The 15th Amendment states that every African American could vote for African American congressmen. The Ku Klux Klan was either of the two distinct U.S. hate organizations that have employed terror in the pursuit of their white supremacist agenda. One group was founded immediately after the Civil War and lasted until the 1870s. The other began in 1915 and has continued to the present. The 19th century Klan was originally organized as a social club by Confederate veterans in Pulaski, Tennessee in 1866. They apparently derived the name from the Greek word kaiklos, which comes from the English circle. Klan was added for the sake of alliteration, and Ku Klux Klan emerged. The organization quickly became a vehicle for Southerner white underground resistance to radical Reconstruction. Klan members sought the restoration of white supremacy throughout the intimidation and violence aimed at the newly enfranchised black freedmen. A similar organization, the Knights of the White Camellia, began in Louisiana in 1867. Another one of the many hate organizations of the American Reconstruction was the White League. It is a white paramilitary group started in 1874 that operated to turn Republicans out of office and intimidate freedmen from voting and political organizing. Its first chapter in Grand Parish, Louisiana, was made up of many Confederate veterans who had participated in the Colfax Massacre in April 1873. Chapters were soon found in the other areas of the state and in New Orleans during the later years of the Reconstruction. It was one of the paramilitary groups described as the military arm of the Democratic Party. Through violence and intimidation, its members reduced Republican voting, contributing to the Democrats taking over the control of the Louisiana legislature in 1876. After a while, Democrats regained power. Members of the White League were absorbed into state militias and National Guard. Also in the American Reconstruction of the Civil War, the Black Codes. The Black Codes enacted immediately after the American Civil War, through varying from state to state. They were all intended to secure a steady supply of cheap labor, and all continued to assume the inferiority of the freed slaves. They were vagrancy laws that declared an African American to be vagrant if unemployed and without permanent residence. A person so defined could be arrested, fined, and bound out for a term of labor if unable to pay the fine. Apprentice laws provided for the hiring out of orphans and other young dependents to whites, who often turned out to be their former owners. Some states limited the type of property African Americans could own, and in other states African Americans were excluded from certain businesses or from skilled trades. Former slaves were forbidden to carry firearms or testify in court, except for in cases concerning the other African Americans. Legal marriage between African Americans was provided for, but the interracial marriage was prohibited. Overall, the Civil War Reconstruction didn't reconstruct the South. It may have freed slaves, and it may have written amendments, but still, overall, the Civil War Reconstruction was not successful in many ways. I hope you enjoyed my presentation.